today's guest is Rhonda Noordyk. She is the founder of the Women's Financial Wellness Center, and we connected because we both did a divorce summit. There she is, a few weeks ago. She deals with, as well as who we deal with. Ours are, of course, people dealing with a lot of high conflict situations. Hi, Rhonda.
Hi.
So I was just saying, we deal with, we have overlap in the people that we help. And I know you focus mostly on women, but we said we will help anybody who needs help. We deal with men as well as women. But you've got this whole financial thing that we don't specialize in. And one of the things I love about this community is finding people like you who really know the inside of people's heads and the stress and trauma that they're experiencing while going through the process. So why don't you talk a little bit about what you do, because it's very different from what I do, and how you got to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for hosting this today. I really appreciate it. So I am the founder and CEO of the Women's Financial Wellness Center. I'm actually starting my 9th year in business. And I spend my entire day helping people, particularly women, navigate through the financial aspects of the divorce process. And my background is I taught in higher education. I was actually an adjunct faculty. I had been in the financial industry for many years. And in 2014, I left because I wanted to create an experience that was different. I wanted to create an approach that helped women navigate through the financial aspects that was independent of financial product sales. And at the time, I was the only person that I was looking for a model, and it didn't exist. And so I had a physical location. I have a physical location, but I work with people all over the country and really all over the world, helping them navigate through the financial aspects of the process.
And one of the things that I didn't think of asking you until this moment, but I love this question, is what makes you really good at your job?
Oh my gosh, I love that question. I think there's a couple things. I think it is challenges that I've had in my own life, trauma that I've had in my own life that I have had to work through. So I'm very trauma informed. I think that's the first thing. I'm also a very confident person, wasn't always that way. So again, had my own journey in that space. I love helping women communicate assertively. So I think there's that empowerment component to it. I am not afraid of conflict. I think, that is something that has not always been the case for me. I grew up in a very passive aggressive home. And so I had to learn how to be assertive. And I think if I can help, one woman at a time, be assertive, understand the financials, show up in a way that's empowered, I'm helping women leave a legacy. For me, that's the biggest thing. I want women to they don't have to be experts on everything related to the finances. They just have to know how to think clearly, make good decisions, and navigate through, a really challenging time. And I wake up every single day. I'm passionate about helping women. It's not just something I do. This is my life's work. This is truly what I do. And I know for the trauma part, I never want to get so hard into it that it's like, oh yeah, just another person who's, dealing with trauma, or another person who's married to a narcissist. I have committed to say every single time I talk to somebody, it hits me as if I'm hearing it for the first time. It bothers me. I get emotional because it's so not okay. And so I think that compassion is certainly something that resonates with the clients through the work that we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, you're another one who's been there, we're the been there, got out people. So I don't know if you saw this morning's post, but recently we've been talking to people about how they feel like they're getting PTSD from their own attorneys. And I was speaking to an attorney yesterday about this, who's also a mindfulness teacher, and she was saying, there's a certain amount of trauma that people get from the relationship. There's a certain amount of trauma that they get from the legal system and trying to get out. And there's also a certain amount of trauma that they get from the professionals that they're dealing with who don't understand trauma, who make things worse. So for example, who say, I've already said it to you 3 times. I've already given you, why can't you just figure it out? And one of the things, Rhonda, you just said in part of why you're good at your job is being confident and also understanding trauma and understanding that people need to learn to be assertive, and they also need to learn how to think clearly. Because people who have come out of coercively controlled relationships, men and women, cannot think clearly. And they're suddenly in this position where they have to make really important decisions, and they're being pressured like, finish it, figure it out fast. And it's very hard. So I think I said I wanted to talk a little more about why is it so important to have not just your lawyer be trauma informed, but someone like a financial planner or financial advisors or anyone that you're dealing with be trauma informed. Why is that so different in experience for someone going through, for example, a divorce?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a couple aspects to the divorce process, right? And when we're looking at the finances, it's not just the money part, right? There's the emotional component around money as well. And I think in order for us to be able to make good decisions, we have to have some structure. We have to have the right team of people that are going to help us, right? I mean, it's counterproductive if we're going to have people that are going to re-traumatize the clients. It's something that, I have been sitting on a podcast. I've done some solo episodes on my podcast called Divorce Conversations for Women. And I did one on the false sense of amicability, where people are hopeful that, things are going to be amicable, even though the 20-year history was kidding me. We also did one on the false sense of financial security. Don't worry about it. You'll be fine. But I'll be honest with you. The one that's in the queue that I have not recorded yet is this false sense of justice. Because this is exactly what we're talking about. And I have been trying to formulate in my mind the best way to approach it, because it's such a problem. And I don't think there's enough people that are talking about it. It's not just the attorneys. It's sometimes the mediators, the commissioners, the magistrates, the judges that are, like you said, they're gaslighting them. They're saying, don't worry about it. I'm in charge. We'll deal with that later. They're saying, well, yeah, every kid has a problem as they're going through divorce. The fact that your spouse has been abusing them, this is normal things that your kids are dealing with. It's not. And so what happens is the women that reach out, right? Absolutely. We see the comments, right? The trusting the judges, expecting that the court system is going to, in some way, right, help protect them. What it's doing is it's forcing women to not trust their intuition, to second guess. I mean, there's so many times when they'll say, Rhonda, I feel like I'm asking too much. I feel like I'm taking up my attorney's time, like I'm bothering them, right? Oh, and I said, listen, let me be very clear. Yes, there are times, right, when people can be very difficult and have unrealistic expectations. But I said, what you're asking for is simple, basic things. You're asking for communication, timely communication. You're asking for transparency. You're asking for respect. I don't know. I don't know how to operate any other way. And so to me, I'm like, of course you should be asking these things. You should be asking the questions. And so what happens is, as women are trying to step into their own and they're starting to ask questions, or they're trying to ask questions, and the attorneys shut them down, and they shut them down, and they shut them down. And finally they're like, okay, well, what's wrong with me? Right? Not okay. It's not okay.
Yeah. I know. Go ahead.
So, how does that translate to the financial stuff? Well, if a good portion, right, of most of the divorce, in addition to the kid stuff, right, is the finances. Huge. And so women are trying to figure out, right, like, where do I go from here? What questions do I need to be asking? And so, I love being that sounding board for women to say, listen, you're not asking too much. You're asking the right questions. You just don't have the right people.
Exactly. So as you were talking, I'm like taking frantic notes, thinking, I want to remember to say this, and I hope I could read my handwriting. But I love that idea of the false sense of fill in the blank, amicability, financial security, and now what you have coming up, the false sense of justice. I have a quote in my head that one of our clients said yesterday that her attorney said to her, which is something like, if you're looking for justice, you're not going to find it in the legal system. And so that's the problem, is we still believe that that's where we turn. That's our relief, is in the justice system, but then we are re-traumatized by all of the injustice that occurs in the justice system, legal system. I mean, and that's, that's what Chris and I specialize in, is legal abuse, is people who are being traumatized again and again by being stuck in courts for so long, that post-separation legal abuse where it just continues on a whole new level. And the way it's so painful in particular is financially, because it costs money to be in the legal system. You have to have representation. And if you don't, then you have to have a very strong capacity for all kinds of things. And it takes time and a lot of work to get there. So you're really handicapped. Another thing that you said about lawyers shutting clients down, I don't know if you saw, I had mentioned earlier, I have PTSD from my own lawyer, is people tend to repeat the same toxic cycle with some of the professionals that they use. We often say, when you're in these toxic relationships, you've given, without meaning to, but you've given your authority to somebody else. And when you're in the divorce process, many people haven't done this before. So they're like, I have this lawyer, here's $20,000 retainer, I have a finance, and then they're going to take care of it for me. And then that professional can sometimes say, I'll take care of it for you, but you have to realize this is your life and your family, and those professionals are going to go away and on to the next case and the next client, and you're still stuck with these huge issues. So that's why it is so important to have the right professionals helping you navigate through these important things. Money's a big deal. We know custody, money, and those are two things that the court deals with in particular, at least family court.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what I think the other piece of it is, right? Like when I started my business, I said, I want to help women. If I can help one woman, right, be empowered and have a better relationship with money as a result of going through this process, I've empowered her for a lifetime, right? My role in these situations is independent of financial product sales. I'm no longer a financial planner. I'm not affiliated with a firm, right? My goal is to come in, whether sometimes I'm coming in the beginning, sometimes I'm coming in the middle of the movie, to help women navigate through those pieces, empower them so that when this process is over and we do the wrap up and we create the action plan for what's next, they have learned how to think, right? They've learned how to approach decisions, right, around money. And at the end of the day,
to question.
Right, to ask questions. I mean, it's so important. And I think that taking that holistic approach, when I was in the financial industry, one of the biggest, I don't know, I guess you could say like comments that I got from colleagues was, Rhonda, why are you spending so much time dealing with the emotional aspect of the financial piece? Don't just get into it, right? And I'm like, here's the thing though. We can't do that, right? As women, right? We're not going to just leave our emotions at the door. We're not just going to show up and think logically. The emotions are part of it. What we need to do is identify where those emotions are for us around the money. We need to work through those pieces, right? And then, yeah, by the way, there's going to be a logical component to it, but it's all part of it. It's very holistic in the approach. And, when I was starting my business, one of the inspirations that I had for starting my business was in my area, there was a healthcare company that was opening a women's pavilion. And I remember this was like actually when I was still in college in the mid 90s. And I read an article and I was like, listen, there needs to be something like this for women in other areas of our life. What they did was they said, listen, we see women as a whole. We want to be there to help them through these major life decisions, right? Through all of the phases. And I really took that to heart. And then as I was looking at my business model, I'm like, I want to approach things in a holistic way. I want to look at the whole picture. I want there to be, there's going to be the emotional piece of it. It's part of the territory. And I think my male colleagues at the time were like, where's the logical piece? We're going to crunch the numbers. Here's what it is. I had a client recently who said, Rhonda, if I told you that my priorities were different, would you have different suggestions for me? Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Like, it's not just, hey, we're going to take all the assets and liabilities and just divide it in the middle and move on. Like, what's important to you? Do you want more liquidity? Is retirement more important? Like, let's look at that and figure out maybe some options, right? Around that's customized to what's important to you. And so I think, that facility still thriving today, met women where they were at, has transformed their healthcare experience for women. And I have said from the very beginning, I want to continue to transform the divorce financial experience for women. And that's really the core of, what we're all about.
Yeah. I mean, what you said in terms of beginning with someone's emotions, I think that applies to any human being as well. And I think about a friend and colleague of ours, Raiford Palmer, an attorney in Chicago, and he was talking about how attorneys generally, when they go to law school, are trained in 90% law and 10% client relations. But then when you go out into the world, it's 90% client relations and 10% law. And I think recognizing people for especially in the divorce process or separation or whatever it is, custody issues, that recognizing the high level of emotion that there needs to be validated before anything. Because you think about the intimate relationships that you develop with the professionals involved with your case, you have to trust them. You have to trust that they can be your allies and your advocates. And how can you start trust if you feel like they don't even understand where you're at in your head? Not that you should spend entire sessions as if they're therapy sessions, but people need to understand, especially around kids and money, there's a lot of emotions going on. So it is so important to start with the emotions and at least recognize that you're dealing with highly emotional people and they have every right to feel that way. Instead of just, okay, let's get right to the money or the logical stuff. It doesn't work with human beings. And that's why I think it's so important. Empathy is so important.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. And the other thing that I was thinking too while you were talking, Lisa, is I think at the end of the day, because of where we're at, right? There's been a lot more awareness to some of the challenges that people deal with personality wise and things like that, right? And so there's definitely been an awareness of it. And I think a lot of times people will go in to interview a professional and they'll say, hey, I think my spouse is a narcissist, or they've been diagnosed as such, or whatever, and the professional will say, oh yeah, we deal with that all the time. But what I want to challenge people to ask is, okay, yes, maybe that's their answer. Can you give me an example? What was the outcome of a specific case that you worked on without, of course, breaching any confidentiality, but give me an example of success that you've had in a situation like that, and put people on the spot a little bit, because I think what happens then is people hire the professional that gave them lip service to their experience, and quite frankly, they're part of the problem because they end up re-traumatizing the clients, which is exactly what we're trying to avoid, right? So like when I partner with professionals, that is one of the things that I have a question on the questionnaire. We have a conversation. Are you trauma informed? How do you handle those specific situations? I'm not looking at partnering with anybody who will just tell us that that's the case. I want specific examples, and then, right, seeing how that plays out and holding people accountable to that.
Yeah. What you're saying makes me think of something. We have a section in our book about choosing the right attorney and things, what to expect from a relationship and questions to ask. But one of the red flags is when you ask someone, do you deal with cases like with high conflict personalities? And they say, we deal with all cases. That shows no understanding of the significant difference. So for us, that's a red flag. But when you said, like, people say, oh, we deal with that all the time, and you ask them to give examples, we have something like that too, which also tests how well they listen, to say, how would you deal with a case like mine? Because now I'm giving you information about my case, and you can show me how you would deal with a case like mine, which does involve high conflict, instead of just saying, yeah, I already know. Because to me, it tells me you're not listening.
Yeah.
So I love that example you gave too.
No, absolutely. And I think, again, I mean, those are the types of questions that I think moving forward, we're going to have to really start, dialing into, because otherwise people, start down a path with a team that really ends up, really potentially even setting them back instead of moving them forward.
Oh, definitely. I mean, and I think I told you about, and some of the people watching now and later know, that we have a series with an attorney in Canada and a woman named Angie called The Client as Consumer, where the point is that we make bigger decisions about buying appliances, or, we put more time and thought into buying appliances than we do with choosing some of the professionals involved with these major changes in our lives. And so we need to look at this like a consumer, like if people read consumer reports because they want to find what's the best model of something. So the same thing with choosing the professionals involved. You want to make sure you have the right people on your case, because this is important. This is your family and your safety.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. It is really important for sure.
Yeah. So speaking of that, let's talk about strategy. We talk a lot about strategy, but how is strategy important in what you do?
Oh my goodness, it's essential, right? I think when I look at, how my brain is wired, it's strategy, right? I mean, it's just something that comes very naturally for me, where I'm looking at the picture, I'm trying to figure out, okay, what's our next best move? What do we need to be asking? What do we need to be looking at? And part of that is, just again, the experience over the years of developing a process that helps us to do that. And so it's just been really helpful. I mean, it's the core of what we do. I'm not just the person who's crunching the numbers and saying, hey, here's a big report and whatever. We're looking at the situation, we're developing a strategy, we're looking at what your next best move is. I mean, we're doing things like laying the foundation with budgeting. I know, not sexy or glamorous, but it's really important. The budgeting piece, the evaluating and looking at the documentation and what does that mean for you, and just again addressing things as they come up, and then figuring out, okay, well, now we have more information, now we have new information, now what do we do with that, and what kinds of things. And sometimes it's I wouldn't say as simple as, but sometimes it's just identifying, yeah, what questions to be asking. So one of the parts of the program that I have developed is identifying gaps. It's the I of bridge. Each of the letters stands for something. And so we're identifying the gaps in that specific case or situation. What are the gaps? What information do you need? What additional add-on professionals might you need? Does it make sense to do that? Are there gaps in confidence? Are there gaps in wages, right? Which we see, right? Are there gaps in transparency? Like what is it that we need? What gaps do we need to fill to help us navigate through that? And that is part of, the strategy that I'm helping clients identify and move through.
You know, when you talk about this, I thought of a question that's come up lately, an urgent question, and I don't know how much experience you have with this, is with money. And in these high conflict cases where it takes a long time for things to be figured out, we're hearing more and more about, how can I live right now? I have no money. This person is not paying. Do you know anything about that? Like, or how do you advise people on how to handle when the person's not paying and our client has no money?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenging situation, right? And I think that's where initially, early on in the process, it's really, really helpful to be able to ask the right questions. I'll give you a quick example. So I was working with a client. She came to me, already had an attorney. Unfortunately, felt like the attorney really wasn't answering her questions. She really didn't feel like she was making headway. So she did end up switching attorneys. And the new attorney was somebody that was in my network that I had worked with and I felt like would be a good fit for her situation. She was based in one state. They had a property in another state. And what we wanted to be able to do is get, information around that property. We wanted to make sure that nothing could be done with that property without both parties, being involved. And so at the end of the day, there were two things. One is we needed to be able to freeze an account. And the other thing was we needed to be able to make sure that we had some control over the property, the selling of that property. And both of those things, a lot of times people think are very, oh, we'll just deal with it later. Oh, we're not going to deal with something until there's a problem. But what was interesting about this specific situation was one of the accounts that we had asked about getting frozen. Several of the attorneys said we can't do that. And in fact, they can do that if they want
Mm.
to. And so what ended up happening was this particular, her spouse was over 59 and a half. So what happened was he could take money out of retirement accounts without there being a penalty. A lot of times there's kind of that natural barrier, right? Of,
Mhm.
well, you're pre 59 and a half, so they're probably not going to take money out of the retirement accounts. And most of the time people don't. But in this case, there was no barrier. So I had asked the client if we could freeze the account, and the new attorney said, yeah, no problem. So we went through the things to handle that. And now the good news is it laid under the radar. And he didn't know that the account was frozen until he went to go to try to take money out of it. And so to see the check with like the frozen stamp on it was like, okay, thank you. Yes. So those are the kinds of little things that, again, I mean, we're relying on the attorneys. My job is to help kind of say, here's some things that I've seen. Let's go back and ask if they can do that. And if we get and it's not just, oh, well, we're not getting the answer we need, so we want to keep asking. But the answers
Right.
that she was getting were not accurate. They said no because they didn't want to do it. Well, we
Yeah.
can't work in another state. Yeah, you can. I mean, we did it. So I don't know what the problem was, but like, those are the kinds of things that end up happening. The other quick example, and then we can move on from this, but it's really a good one. A good example of this is I had another client who they had a non-qualified account. So again, it was a non-retirement account, had a significant amount of money in there. I asked the attorney literally 3 times if we could split that account because I felt like it was exposed risk for my client. And they ignored the attorney ignored me. So again, we ended up the client ended up switching attorneys to another attorney that I work with that I had suggested. And again, are we always switching attorneys? No. Okay. It has to make sense, but we weren't getting anywhere with that. And so long story short, one of the first things we said when she hired the new attorney is, listen, I really want this account split. I'm really feeling like, well, guess what? From the very first time that I asked until the time that account was actually split, took 3 weeks for the new attorney to make that happen. We're not talking months. It was super fast. And at the end of the day, that account had lost 150 grand between the time I first asked and the time that it got split. Not okay.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh. And so these are the kinds of things that, behind the scenes, I'm willing to ask the tough questions. Again, I have a lot of respect for attorneys, right? There are certainly good ones. But at the end of the day, sometimes it's, well, this is how we've always done things. This is how it goes. This is how your situation goes. And so sometimes even when we ask the question, like, how would you handle my situation? I think sometimes they look at it like, well, here's how I've handled the 100 before you, so this is what we would do. Instead of sometimes taking a fresh look at maybe the situation, some of these more kind of aggressive, right, tactics would make sense.
Absolutely.
It's just, it's taking a new look at it, and challenging that a little bit.
Yeah. And as you're talking, it makes me think about the importance of having a team to help a person where they're not just relying on one person's proprietary opinion, but okay, that person has opinion. Certainly, like a lawyer, they handle the legal stuff, but to have other people involved, not everybody involved, but people who understand, who, like you said, could get a fresh set of eyes or some new ideas. I mean, everybody can always learn something, right? And if you can find information that can actually be used, then you yourself are becoming empowered.
Yep.
Which is helping you move on from these difficult relationships, like not just giving blind authority to everybody involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and I think that's a good point too, Lisa, in a sense of like, I look at the divorce space, right? I mean, if the professionals in here don't want to continue to learn, it's not probably the best fit for them. Because, I mean, there isn't a day that goes by that I'm like, that's interesting. Let me think about that. I mean, that's 18,000 plus hours, and this is all I do. And I'm always learning something new. And I'm sure you could say the same, like, that's interesting. Okay, let's look at that. Like, we have to have an attitude of always looking for, right, new information as it becomes available, or new ways to maybe look at something, because it isn't black and white. I mean, if that was the case and you had 5 different judges, they would all have the same opinion and you'd all have the same outcome. That's not the case. It depends on the judge, which means there's some subjectivity, not objectivity, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we operate so much in the space of the art of persuasion, and law is flexible. So how well can you present a narrative? What do you have? What more information can you bring to the table? And part of people complain a lot about how judges need to be educated, and they do, but they don't realize. And I went to a conference with the author of the book, Coercive Control, Evan Stark, and he said right out of his mouth, you clients, like the parties in a case, you yourself can educate the judge through your experience and your story. Not that you're talking about your life and how you need justice, but describing someone's pattern of behaviors over time to say, this is why I'm entitled to this, using case law, using a strong narrative to get what you need. Like, that educates people. I've interviewed attorneys on here, one in particular who was dealing with racial bias, and she managed to turn the judge completely around. It took 1 year and 9 months, but she did it. So people who can learn, like, people are capable of learning, and it's not up to some, person who we don't know who's going to take care of it. Like, we ourselves can be part of educating people
Yeah.
who can affect our lives and other
Yeah.
people's lives.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's part of it too. I mean, there is still this aspect of grassroots efforts, right, in the divorce space for us to be able to impact and influence change one person, one case, one situation at a time. And I know that, we as a collective group, right? I'm one person, you're one person, but as a collective group, moving the needle,
Yeah.
right? Moving the needle so that, things are a little bit different, moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big part of that is that you have agency. You can have agency in your own case. It's not like you're just thrown to the wolves.
Yep.
Like things you do have an effect on the outcome.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So speaking of that, I had said I was going to ask you, what are some key things that you want people to take away, some ideas about money and divorce? Any top tips or things that you need to know?
I would say, and again, just kind of keeping it high level, but I think at the end of the day, a lot of times when I talk to them and they're like, well, Rhonda, I'm smart, but, and I'm like, yeah, you're smart. There's no but about it. This is a non-starter, right?
It's
Like,
an
yes, you're
and. It's
smart.
an and. I'm
Yes,
smart
and, right?
and.
Exactly. But I would say at the end of the day, right, the formula for like, how do we navigate through that, right? I always like people to think of this, how do you get the confidence, right? Maybe you look back and you're like, yeah, before I was, married or before I was involved, I had confidence. Well, how do you get that back, right? I think there's a really great formula for that, and that is it's knowledge plus experience that gives us the confidence. And if we have the knowledge without the experience, it's theory. If we have the experience without the knowledge, it's trial and error. Like, okay, I've done this a couple times and it's still not working. But when we get the two of them together, the financial knowledge and the financial experience, we can step into our confidence, right? And that's ultimately what I think, when I worked in the financial industry, one of the biggest challenges that I saw for women was, hey, my husband says we've got a guy or blah, blah, blah. And it was just out of sight, out of mind, right? Like, hey, it's unfortunately, right, when we're making decisions and making choices, we either move toward the things that bring us pleasure or away from things that bring us pain. And the divorce process, as terrible and overwhelming and frustrating as it can be, it's the perfect ground for women to step into their power and to start realizing that they really can make good decisions and they really can start to trust their intuition that's laid dormant for so many years, right? And I think having some structure, having a process that helps women navigate through that is really, really helpful. So that, I mean, I think at the end of the day, Lisa, that's really the message that I want women to know. Yeah. Are there details around who's going to get what and what? Yes. That is all stuff that can be figured out, right? But at the end of the day, there's this core confidence piece that I want to be part of, helping women rebuild their confidence around the financial aspect. And I love getting the stories on the other side. Hey, Rhonda, I bought a business. Hey, Rhonda, I was able to purchase a condo. Hey, Rhonda, I refinanced my vehicle. Like and guess what? I showed up and I was able to negotiate. I mean, yes, sister, like that is what this is all about for me. And so I know that I have the opportunity, responsibility, and privilege to be part of, those conversations and that transformation for women as they're going through this process.
Yeah, and that resonates so much with me, and the same thing with our clients. This is an opportunity. Like, it's horrible that you're here, but I never realized what kind of opportunity it was for me, and to draw on skills and talents that I had before meeting my ex or during that time when I thought those were gone. But in my situation, to be able to use those skills in the courtroom and prevail.
Yeah.
And one of the things I'm most proud of is that my case is published in the Connecticut Law Journal. So it's case law for the state. And I did it by myself without an attorney, which is so rare. Like, who would have, that gave me so much confidence. Like, I would have never had an experience like that. So from, something terrible, you can have greatness. And we focus on progress with our clients. Like, every bit of progress you make, that's a triumph. And nobody wants you to have to deal with this. But if you start looking in and thinking, like, just getting through this, that's an achievement. Like, think about all the people who don't have to deal with this kind of challenge. This is the kind of thing that builds tremendous resilience and strength that can be applied to other areas of your life. And just like you with the success stories, we hear it all the time. from men and women in particular, where it's like, I didn't realize I had it in me, who sometimes go on to completely different careers. Like one of our clients who was pro se and at the bottom of the power, the totem of power in this country, is now going to law school and becoming a trauma-informed attorney. Like, terrible story of abuse, did well as a pro se, and now her life has completely changed. And just like, we just feel so much pride, just like you, to see. I mean, that's an extreme case, but every day we see triumphs. And I wish that there were more people putting out triumphs, especially on social media, instead of just terrifying people to think that they don't have any agency and there's nothing they can do and they're just going to suffer. Because in our world, there's a lot of suffering, but there's also a lot of like wonderful moments that we celebrate together.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think, you know what, congratulations to you, because I think, that is the piece, right? Knowing that we can make an impact, knowing that we have the opportunity to change case law. I mean, that is awesome, like awesome. And so congratulations. I think that's so, so fantastic.
Yeah, well, we're all still making changes all the time. But Rhonda, before, I don't want to take up more time, but how can people find you? What do you offer, and how can people find you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's a couple different ways. So obviously my Instagram handle is my name, at Rhonda Noordyk. So certainly feel free to follow me. My website does have a host of different options as well. We've got a podcast called Divorce Conversations for Women. I launched that many years ago, and it's just been really a great source of inspiration and encouragement and just honest, transparent conversations for our listeners. So that's been great. And the website is wfwcdivorce.com. So they can check out the website. There's blog articles, and certainly they can take a quiz. So the quiz is what is your next best move, right? It's a great quiz to say, hey, what should I be doing next? And there's really 3 different outcomes that people can get depending on how they answer the questions, so that they know what their next best move is.
That's great. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I know this isn't going to be our last conversation, because I'm going to be doing your podcast in a couple of weeks, and I'm sure you'll be back on here as well. But thanks, everybody. And hopefully this has been helpful, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Thanks, Lisa.
Bye. Bye.